We also need to use the selection tool if we're interested in ever cutting, copying, or pasting something. So cut, copy, and paste and delete are a huge tool that you're going to be using over and over and over, but it all starts with the selection tool. So let me just select just his ear by using my lasso tool on one part of that ear. And up here you'll find the cut, copy, and paste and delete tools along with the undo and redo buttons. And this whole thing is basically the editing toolbar. And if for some reason you can't find it, go over to Toolbars, and then you'll find it under Edit. You'll see as I uncheck it, it disappears. Then I go over to Toolbars, go to Edit, and it reappears. So in order to cut something, first I need to select it, and then I go over to the scissors, and that's going to cut it. I just press that, and it disappears, but it hasn't vanished completely. It's still in the memory, the clipboard of the machine, so that I am able later on, if I want to paste it, and you'll see that right now that's the only option available to me is this paste button, and I press it and it pastes it right back in place. And that's one of the really nice things about this tool is it will always paste it right back in place, so that if you have to move something to a different drawing or a different layer, it will remain consistently in the same place. If I want to copy something, I will select that item and go over to here where you see two pieces of paper like it's been copied, and you press that and it copies it. Nothing shows up right now because you haven't pasted it yet. So the next phase is that you want to paste whatever it was you copied. And in this case, since it's pasted right on top of the old version, it offsets it a little bit so that you can freely grab it, because if it had pasted it directly over the old ear, we never would have been able to see it. Now we've seen how to cut and paste on a vector layer, but now I've got an image that has two layers, and one of which is a vector layer, and the background that I imported is a bitmap layer. So first, let me show you what happens. You can cut from a vector layer and paste it on a bitmap layer. I'm going to use the selection tool in this case to select that whole ear. I'm going to press Control C or Command C or the copy button that's up here in the toolbar. Just so we can see what we're doing, I'm going to turn that layer off. So now I'm on the bitmap layer and I'm going to hit paste, and it pastes my vector drawing, but now it's on a bitmap layer, so it's no longer like I can't go in and change the colors anymore. That's not an option because it just behaves like a piece of bitmap art. So there are still selections that I can do to it, but it's a bit more difficult to pick up because this whole layer tends to move together. But you can definitely combine vector art on top of bitmap art. It just becomes a new piece of bitmap art. Now we can also cut bitmap art out of a bitmap layer and paste it onto a vector layer. On a bitmap layer, we're not going to really be able to use the selection tool to grab something because it will pretty much grab the entire layer. So we're going to use the cutter tool, and I will usually choose the option to have anti-aliasing on, and I'm just going to cut a little hole in the sky there, and I'm going to press copy, or I could press cut just for fun, just to put a hole in the sky. And now I'm going to turn this layer off just so we can see what we're doing. I'm going to open up a vector layer, and now I'm going to press paste, and it has pasted this little chunk of sky I have taken out of my bitmap layer and pasted on a vector layer. Now it's still a piece of bitmap art. It doesn't, again, I can't interact with it by changing colors, but I am able to stretch it and turn it and do a whole bunch of other things. So that is possible to cut from bitmap and paste on vector, but you just get a flat bitmap object that's on your vector layer. You could certainly cut, copy, and paste within a bitmap layer all by itself. So I'm going to go in here, and once again I'm going to use the cutter tool to cut. I like using the anti-aliasing on option. There is an option, again, in the cutter tool. You could use a square marquee to cut, but I just personally don't find it as useful as the lasso. But if you're working on something with more rectangular geometric shapes, then that option in the cutter tools, the marquee option, could be useful for you. So I'm going to use the lasso. All I'm trying to do is use the cutter tool to cut from a bitmap, and I've cut a hole in the sky, and then I'm going to paste the bitmap chunk back on the same bitmap artwork, and I can move it around. Again, it may be a little difficult to grab at times because these layers tend to move all at once, but you can resize it, you can stretch it. Now you'll notice that it's really low resolution, and that's because bitmap layers are not infinitely scalable like vector layers are. So that's the limitation that you have with a bitmap. But I can just place that hole right in the building there, and so you can cut, copy, and paste on bitmaps and on vector drawings.